tonight, we want answers and accountability. A joint fatal accident inquiry is underway into the deaths of two young people who took their own lives at Polmont Young Offenders Institution.
They feel they have been failed by the Scottish criminal justice system since the day of their daughter's death. Yet today they are once again facing another process which cannot apportion blame.
Also making the headlines, a pledge to speed up compensation and justice for victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal following an STV drama.
A charity in one of Glasgow's most deprived areas says it's struggling to stay afloat amid record demand.
And living the American dream, we speak to Robert McIntyre after he makes the switch to the United States. I'm Kellyanne Woodland in Edinburgh.
And I'm John Mackay in Glasgow. This is the STV News at 6.
Good evening. A fatal accident inquiry has heard a 16-year-old who took his own life in Polmont Young Offenders Institution had been removed from suicide watch just hours earlier. William Lindsay had been remanded in custody due to a lack of beds in a secure unit 3 days before he died in 2018.
Today, a joint fatal accident inquiry into the teenager's death and that of 21-year-old Katie Allen got underway. This inquiry will not be to apportion blame. The families say they want answers and accountability and an independent body to investigate prison deaths. Our chief reporter, Sharon Frew, was in court.
For both families, the start of this fatal accident inquiry is an important milestone. It's taken 5 years to reach this stage. Katie Allen and William Lindsay, who was also known as Brown, died within 4 months of each other while in custody at Polmont. Before proceedings began, Katie's parents and their solicitor called for the truth and reform.
They feel they have been failed by the Scottish criminal justice system since the day of their daughter's death. Yet today they are once again facing another process which cannot apportion blame. The Crown Office has said there was credible and reliable evidence to pursue a criminal prosecution against the Scottish Prison Service, but Crown immunity prevents them from doing so. Katie's parents believe that the Scottish Prison Service have no accountability for the avoidable deaths of young people.
Katie Allen, who took her own life in June 2018, had been jailed for 16 months for drink driving. The inquiry heard the geography student had a history of self-harming and had twice been subjected to random strip searches. In her 3 months at Polmont, she had lost more than a stone in weight. Her mother saw her the afternoon before her death. The inquiry was told it was a matter of agreement, that by the end of that visit, Linda Allen had told a prison officer her daughter was being berated by fellow inmates and was terrified. William Lindsay was sent to Polmont 4 months after Katie's death. The 16-year-old, who had spent most of his life in the care system, struggled with his mental health. He was detained after he walked into a Glasgow police station carrying a knife. When repeated attempts to find him a bed in a secure unit failed, the teenager was placed on remand. On the 4th of October 2018, a letter was sent to Polmont informing them that William Lindsay should be considered as a suicide risk. After his arrival, the teenager was placed on 30-minute observations for reassurance and safety. The following morning, a case conference was held and officers assessed that there was no apparent risk of suicide, and these checks were removed. William was found dead in his cell on the morning of the 7th of October. William's brother also wants more safeguards.
He cannot imagine the fear that William, as a boy of 16, must have had going into Polmont. Polmont had a duty of care towards William and it was simply not observed.
The Scottish Prison Service say the loss of any person in its care is devastating and that everyone who enters custody is assessed to identify what support is needed. The Crown Office acknowledged that the wait for these proceedings to begin has been too long, and it added that the inquiry will allow a full public airing of all the evidence. This inquiry is expected to last 3 weeks. Sharon Frew, STV News, Falkirk.
Well, some breaking news coming into us now, and more than 200 jobs have been lost after one of Scotland's biggest house builders went into administration. The founder of Stuart Milne Homes says he's devastated by the collapse of the company.
The group, which has headquarters in Aberdeen, was founded in 1975 and has sites in central and northern Scotland, employing around 1,000 people. Well, our senior reporter Gordon Cree has been following the story. So Gordon, what more can you tell us?
Well, John, Stuart Milne Homes was known as a high-end housing developer. This is a site on the outskirts of Edinburgh offering 4-, 5- and 6-bedroom luxury homes starting at around £400,000. Stuart Milne himself, a very high-profile individual, particularly because of his long stint as the chairman and owner of Aberdeen Football Club, when he was often pictured alongside prominent figures from the game. Now, we know the last few years have been tough for the house building industry. COVID forced a shutdown. Then there's been high inflation, which meant building materials in particular soared in cost. But now the sites had been operating as normal. People were working on building sites today, but we understand that just before 4 this afternoon, they were called into a meeting to be told the company was going into administration with many jobs going. And for some of the people working on sites who are paid week to week, there is doubt for them about whether they will receive money for their most recent weeks. Now, the administrators have said that the downturn in the housing market has not resulted in any viable offers for the business. It ultimately led to the need to place some parts of the company into administration with immediate redundancies, and they say they continue to assess all the options in respect of development sites like this one and encourage any interested parties to get in touch.
And Gordon, what's been the reaction to the announcement?
Well, first reaction from Stuart Milne himself, who says he's devastated by this totally unexpected outcome of the sales process. He says he's struggling to accept it, given the profound impact it will have on employees, subcontractors, suppliers and customers. He said he tried everything he could to find a way to achieve a better outcome for the business and people who depend on it. He believes one of the bids, he says, would have delivered a comparable financial return and allowed the business to continue operating, but that has not happened. The company is now in administration. A lot of people will have a lot of questions. The company website is pointing people to answers to some of those, and the administrators say they will be in touch with anyone who's put down a deposit on a Stuart Milne house.
Gordon, thank you. Leaders from across the political spectrum have pledged action to speed up compensation and justice for victims of the Post Office Horizon scandal, which saw hundreds wrongly convicted based on evidence from a faulty software system.
It follows a renewed outcry following an STV drama about what's been called the UK's most widespread miscarriage of justice. Our Westminster correspondent Paris Gurtsayanis reports.
Myra Philp remembers her mother, Mary, as a proud and honest woman. Mary worked for the police before going into business with her daughter in 2001, running the post office in Auchtermuchty, Fife. Within a couple of months, the Horizon IT system showed money was missing.
Because we were so new, we thought we were doing something wrong. We were told that we were the only ones that the shortfalls were happening to.
It cost the women £70,000 of their own money, and when Mary was suspended by the post office, it destroyed her confidence.
She never worked again. She was devastated by the false accusation. The community, some of them were nice, but most of them weren't. And any time we spoke about it going on, she would well up.
Thousands of other sub-postmasters were wrongly accused of taking money, and hundreds were prosecuted.
They're not calling me a thief. They wouldn't dare. They say money's somehow gone missing from this branch, which it hasn't, and I have to pay it back, which I won't. So now they want to close me down to shut me up.
That's ridiculous.
Because they don't want everyone knowing what I know.
Which is?
That the fancy new computer system that they've spent an arm and a leg on is faulty.
Public attention has focused on the issue thanks to an STV drama, But this is a scandal that has rumbled on for well over a decade. Now, politicians are pledging to speed up compensation and the slow, difficult process of clearing those wrongly accused.
The Justice Secretary today is meeting with the relevant ministers to see is there more we can do to speed up some of those processes. But people should be rest assured the money is there. I approved it as Chancellor. There are 3 different compensation schemes, and we will do everything we can to make this right for all the people affected.
The government could pass legislation, so obviously we'd support that if they did. It might be possible to get these cases back before the Court of Appeal quickly. I've done that when I was prosecutor, but whichever way it's done, these convictions need to be looked at.
Mary Philp died in 2018, before the injustice against sub-postmasters was proved in court.
She would have been angry because she'd worked out it was Horizon and she made a big noise about it, and I still to this day say that's why we were targeted. But on the other hand, she would have been very happy that, you know, now people are actually standing up and taking notice.
Well, Paris joins us now from Westminster. And Paris, what's been the political response to the fresh attention on the Horizon scandal?
Well, MPs returned to Westminster today after the Christmas break, and already there's been a significant reaction. In the next hour, there's going to be a statement in the Commons, and there's hope across all parties of a blanket pardon for everyone convicted using faulty evidence from the Horizon system. That would require legislation at Westminster and at Holyrood. The Scottish Government says tonight that it is urgently considering what steps could be taken to clear the names of convicted sub-postmasters.
And Paris, what about compensation for those affected?
Well, there's a lot of anger at the delays to compensation. In the past couple of years, payments of £160,000 each have been made to just under 3,000 people. The government accepts that many of them are owed much more than that, but further payments can't be made until convictions are overturned. Meanwhile, a public inquiry into the scandal continues this week, and the police have said that they're investigating if the Post Office itself broke the law in pursuing sub-postmasters. Meanwhile, there's also a petition for Paula Venables, the former CEO of the Post Office, to be stripped of her CBE. That's passed 1 million signatures. The fight for accountability goes on.
All right, Paris, thank you very much. Well, the First Minister Hamza Yousaf says that he expects Sir Keir Starmer to be the next Prime Minister, and he's ready to work with the Labour leader on tackling child poverty. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar is rejecting the Scottish Government's plans to increase income tax for higher earners.
Both were hitting the campaign trail after the festive break, and our political editor Colin Mackay watched both speeches. So, Colin, what did they have to say?
Well, Anna Sarwar kicked things off inevitably in Rutherglen after that spectacular Labour by-election win 3 months ago. Change was his watchword. He mentioned it about 30 times in the course of his speech. Obviously, he wants to change the government, but he also wants SNP voters to change to Labour. And he attacked the SNP Scottish Government budget for increasing income tax for higher earners without first increasing economic growth.
They can't say we're going to do no change and we're not going to deliver any economic growth, we're not going to reform our public services, we're not going to go for growth, but all we're going to keep doing is incrementally increase people's taxes.
So
that is not going to work.
Where would you set the level for the people with the broadest shoulders if not at 29,000? Where would you set that?
Therefore, what we're going to have to do in 2026 is we're going to have to set ourselves a growth target, go for growth, and say if we achieve this growth in partnership with businesses across the country, that allows us to create the money in order to reform our public services, but also then to create that money to reduce the tax burden of working people across the country. That is a longer term plan.
And you're going to have to be specific, but you're refusing to be specific just now. You're criticising them for saying that the £29,000 threshold is for the broadest shoulders, but you don't say what you would set it at.
But that's because this budget is a responsibility for the SNP and the Greens to repair 16
give them an alternative. You could give them a better idea, couldn't you?
We have given them a list of £3 billion of ways.
What would you set that threshold for the broadest, those with the broadest shoulders?
So we would not have increased any income taxes in this budget, and instead we've identified billions of pounds of waste that this government is doing. End the waste. Why are we spending £250 million plus on ferries that haven't yet sailed? Why are we wasting £1 billion on delayed discharge when there was promise to be eradicated across the country? End the waste, end the incompetence. That creates the money you need to invest in our public services, rather than time after time after time hitting working people with tax rises in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
So you wouldn't have increased income tax in any way, shape or form in this budget? budget?
We would not increase income tax in this budget. Instead, we would have ended the incompetence, ended the waste.
So, Colin, that was the Scottish Labour leader. What was the First Minister saying?
Well, Hamza Yousaf says the need for independence is now urgent, but given the year the SNP has just had, and given that Rutherglen by-election, it certainly doesn't feel imminent. He was also making the case for voters not to switch to Labour, but to stick with the SNP.
Let's stop kind of beating around the bush. Keir Starmer is going to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, barring a catastrophe. I think we should just be upfront about that. And the thing for Scotland is we have a choice. And straying into the politics somewhat, but we have a choice, of course, in Scotland. Do we have MPs who will stand up for Scotland? And I would argue SNP MPs will always do that. Or do we just have do we have Scottish MPs that just make up the numbers down in Westminster, as I think they would under the Labour Party?
We've just been to see Anas Sarwar. He says that you're having to put up income tax in the current budget because of your own mismanagement and waste. How is increasing income tax going to lead to economic growth in Scotland?
What I would say to Anas Sarwar is that I think it's incredible that we have leader of the Scottish Labour Party that is standing against a policy that has been advocated by the likes of the STUC, by Oxfam, by the Anti-Poverty Alliance, by many anti-poverty groups right across the country, which asks those who are the 5% highest earning in the country, Anas Sarwar, myself included, to pay a little bit more tax so that we can all enjoy the universal benefits, such as free tuition, baby box, no prescription charges, while at the same time having enough money to spend on targeting resources where they're needed the most.
So that's Scottish politics back after the new year. Not so much a big bang as business as usual. And I warn you now that all the party leaders are promising a lot more of these speeches before we get anywhere near the real business of a general election. And after what the Prime Minister said last week, our working assumption has to be that that's going to be later this year rather than sooner.
Colin, thank you.
Well, let's take a look at other stories now. And 3 teenagers have been arrested and charged in connection with an assault on a Wraith Rovers fan after the Fife derby last week. Police say they're 14, 15 and 16 years old. A disabled 17-year-old boy with hearing loss was taken to hospital after the incident in Dunfermline on Tuesday. 3 other males have already been charged and will appear in court at a later date.
3 energy companies have been given permission to resume the force-fitting of prepayment energy meters in people's homes, almost a year after it was suspended. Charities have raised concerns after the industry regulator Ofgem said EDF, Octopus and Scottish Power can install the meters after meeting a set of conditions.
Forcing households onto a prepayment meter, we're almost certainly condemning that household to rationing or indeed completely stopping having the use of energy. So that's no hot drinks, that's no hot showers, no heating on today, which takes an enormous toll on people's physical and mental well-being.
2 people have appeared in court charged with the murder of an Edinburgh man outside a pub shortly before midnight in Hogmanay. The man and woman are also accused of the attempted murder of another man.
Mark Webley, who had ties to gangland activity, was gunned down outside the Anchor Inn in the Granton area of the city after posting videos on social media appearing to suggest he knew his life was under threat. Lewis Mickey has this report.
Like all first appearances in criminal cases in Scotland, today's hearing was held in private at Edinburgh Sheriff Court. 32-year-old Grant Hunter and 25-year-old Emma McVie are accused of murdering 38-year-old Mark Webley outside the Anchor Inn in Granton shortly before the bells on Hogmanay. They're also accused of the attempted murder of another man, aged 39, who was seriously injured in the shooting. The pair were arrested in the early hours of last Friday morning. Police had been trying to find a car that was seen in the area at the time of the shooting and recovered a vehicle 4 miles from the incident last Tuesday. Now, both have been remanded in custody and made no plea today. They will appear again in court within the next 8 days.
Other stories in the West, and a pedestrian who died after being hit by a car in Glasgow's East End has been named by police. Jean Wilson was taken to hospital following the incident in Binney Place on December the 2nd. She died 3 weeks later. Police are appealing for witnesses to the crash. A man who killed his second cousin and then went on the run in Europe has been jailed. Dean Ferguson stabbed his childhood friend Billy Joe Bates in Glasgow on Kippen Street in November 2018. The 30-year-old fled to the Netherlands before being caught and extradited in 2022. He was linked to the killing after police cracked encrypted phone messages. Ferguson pled guilty to a reduced charge of culpable homicide at the High Court in Glasgow and was sentenced to 6 years and 4 months in prison. Police have reappealed for information after a stolen motorbike struck a pensioner and left her with serious injuries. The 69-year-old woman was hit whilst crossing Moss Park Drive in Hogmanay. She was taken to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital where her condition remains serious. Police are still looking to trace the bike driver. A charity in one of Glasgow's most deprived areas says it's struggling to stay afloat amid record demand for its services. Spirit of Springburn opened 3 years ago, giving locals access to several resources like food banks and mental health advice. Without additional funding and more volunteers, the charity fears it may soon have to close its doors. Brandon Cook reports.
Yeah, what are you doing?
The Spirit of Springburn charity has helped locals from this unit in the area's shopping centre since 2021. Here they have a community fridge, a food bank and offer advice on everything from bills to mental health and well-being. Organisers say they provide a vital service which bridges a gap for strained public services. But demand here has grown too and more funding is needed to keep up.
We are trying to do as much as we can on a day-to-day basis, and it's firefighting. There are souls out there that are in desperate need. We've outgrown this space. We need help with funding, running costs.
Spirit of Springburn have launched a fundraising effort to try and meet demand. There's concern of a regression in services at a time when their community needs them most.
I can walk up and down the street and I'll have somebody asking, when are you in next? Can you help me with this bus pass application, or can you help me with this blue badge application? It's literally me walking up and down the street. So can I imagine what it'd be like if this wasn't here? I don't think any of us would be able to walk up the street without needing to give someone support.
The charity says a lack of local authority funding adds its own pressures. Glasgow City Council says it's faced significant financial challenges in recent years, and there's a limited pot of money available from them for third sector groups.
There's limited funds everywhere. Everyone's feeling the pinch in some way, no matter whether you're a big business or a small third sector enterprise like Spirit of Springburn. But what we're asking is people, no matter whether they've got 50 pence or £50, they could put into the community. We will return that investment to help real people.
With many across the area now relying on the charity's services, there's hopes problems can be resolved soon. But there's a feeling of uncertainty at the start of another busy year. Brandon Cook, STV News.
It's been a while, but breathe easy. He's back. It's Rahman with the sport. Middle of winter, Rahman, and we're starting with the golf.
We are indeed, John. That's because we've been speaking to Robert McIntyre, who's made the move to America after securing his first PGA Tour card, and he set his targets high. Good evening. Yes, Robert McIntyre says he's very confident he can win on the PGA Tour as he gets set for his first event of the season in Hawaii later this week. The Scot admits it was a tough decision to leave his family and move to America, but says he's now one step closer to achieving his ultimate dream of winning the Masters. Here's Ronnie Charters.
Living the American dream, Bob McIntyre in the US ahead of his PGA Tour debut and has a maiden win in his sights.
I'm very confident that I know my good golf stacks up against the best in the world. When you get close to something, when you think, you know what, I'm not far away from that, it gives you more of a boost to kind of chase it. And now I'm on the PGA Tour, or I've got my PGA Tour card, it's kind of like I'm closer to another dream of mine, which is winning the Masters.
In moving to the States, McIntyre admitted it was a hugely difficult decision to leave his family in Oban, but says everyone back home has been hugely supportive of his big move.
I've always had a family behind me they've always said chase your dreams. So it wasn't too hard on them. It was more on me. I'm a big family guy. I love spending time with my two little nieces at home, and yeah, I'm not going to get to see them as much, but I'm doing it for a reason, and you got to chase your dreams, I suppose, and that's what I'm trying to do.
2023 was a huge year for the 27-year-old, most notably his debut in the Ryder Cup for Team Europe. The Scot won 2.5 points for Luke Donald's side, but says one moment in particular will stay with him forever.
When you walked into the team area in the hotel, and you're like, wow, they try to make us look through history as we're walking in, and making you know how much this means to the whole European tour, almost the culture of European golf was splattered everywhere, all over the place, and it was kind of like goosebumps going in there, seeing everyone's names that you're next to and you're part of.
McIntyre gets his season underway in Hawaii on Thursday in the Sony Open. Ronnie Charters, STV News.
Football news, and Tom Parks has left Livingston to join English National League side Hartlepool United. The defender made 27 appearances for Livy during an injury-hit spell over 2.5 seasons. He's made the move back to England to be closer to his family. Curling and Olympic silver medalist Bruce Mouat says he's already got one eye on the Winter Olympics in 2 years' time. Mouat's rink, who won the Perth Masters yesterday, will be competing at the Scottish Curling Championships next month before hoping to defend their world title in Switzerland in March and April.
The worlds that we're going to potentially are points for the Olympics, so basically you have to qualify Team GB into the Olympics first. So whoever gets to go to the Worlds has that on their backs. So that's starting to get into people's minds this season.
And sad news to end the sport tonight. German football legend Franz Beckenbauer has died at the age of 78. That, folks, is all your sport tonight. I'll see you again tomorrow.
All right, Raman, thanks very much. Well, it's certainly been cold out there today, hasn't it? Let's get the weather now from Sean.
A spell of sea air will be followed by a strong chance of you have to try these. TUI sponsors STV Weather.
A very good evening to you. Well, that's the cold air with us for a few days, and then slightly less cold later on the week before the proper cold sets in this weekend and next week. We'll take a look at that in a wee second, but a very cold night to come tonight. Plenty of dry weather, clear spells, especially further west. And those temperatures over inland parts, South Lanarkshire, South and East Ayrshire, -3 to -5. So very cold, frosty night. And again, the risk of a few mist patches developing in places as well. Now, tomorrow, rather light today. We've got a very gentle east to northeasterly airflow. So more cloud the further east we go, the best of the sunshine the west, especially the Highlands, Argyll, Ayrshire. Plenty of blue skies around tomorrow. But look at those afternoon temperatures. Again, a bit of an ice day in some spots where those temperatures probably stay around freezing or below. So still very cold. Now, as we go into the middle part of the week, later in the week, the high pressure over the top of us just drifts westwards. Ultimately, its destination is Greenland, and that's when things turn a lot colder for us. But as it's moving away to the west, initially those temperatures will rise. So I expect Wednesday and Thursday our highs will be up to about 5 or 6 degrees. We always hang on to more cloud again in the east with some drizzle. But by the weekend, into the early part of next week, there's the high over Greenland. That gets us into a proper northerly shot. So it will be very cold later on the weekend and into next week. The risk of some extremely cold nights next week, and also the risk of some snow. Bye-bye.
TUI sponsors STV Weather.
Well, staying with the weather, and the freezing temperatures created headaches for some on their travels this morning. The extra slippery conditions resulting in a tricky morning commute. In fact, check out these pictures.
Yes, just wait till you see this. In Kirkcaldy this morning, this school bus lost control on Chapel Road. Just look at that. It slid down the road into parked cars, one of which then crashed into a house. Stagecoach say no passengers were on board and thankfully nobody was injured.
Oh, that was lucky that nobody was injured there. That's
oh,
bad.
Sure was. Well, that's it from us. We're back again tomorrow at 6.
I'll be back with Scotland tonight at 11:15. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Good night.